It is indeed a pleasure, both for the audience here and for the listening audience of C-SPAN, to welcome the Deputy Foreign Minister of the Republic of Cuba, Carlos Fernández de Cossío.
And thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure to be here at IPS and to have the opportunity, again, to share views and to provide some information from our side, from Cuba, on bilateral relationships and on the reality of Cuba today. If Americans as a whole would have better information, if provided with the facts about the nature of U.S. policy towards Cuba, there would be an overwhelming rejection in this country. In the center of all of this also is a failure, a consistent failure by the government and the political class of the United States of understanding and accepting that Cuba is and has the right to be a sovereign nation with the right to self-determination. That the U.S. has no right to pretend to govern Cuba. Cuba has been under increased aggression, basically economic aggression from the U.S. Consistently. When you depress the living conditions of a population, migration inevitably is a natural outcome. Cubans are born with a flag, with a hymn, with a coat of arms, and they believe that if they try to migrate to the United States, they will eventually get there and be accepted. And the ones that are here are the result of those policies. So it is quite cruel to now tell these people that have come to the U.S. and invited into the U.S. by U.S. policies that after they've made a family here, they have jobs, they've made their living, they've sold their home, they sold their vehicle if they had it in Cuba, or they sold their farm if they had it, that they now will be massively returned back. Sometimes, if they made a family with people that already lived here, or with Americans, breaking their family, separating families, which is the logic of doing that when these people did not break, they did not have to tear down a wall to enter the United States. They were invited by the U.S.
You raise your hand. Please state your name and our affiliation.
My name is Lili Bernard, a visual artist, actor from Los Angeles, California.
Take your time.
This is my friend Catherine Murphy, who's a very important documentary filmmaker, has done excellent movies on Cuba. I was telling David Ramirez that I was born in Santiago de Cuba, and my parents took me out when I was 2. And so I looked at Cuba from their lens. And in going back multiple times, I learned the truth about the wonderful things that Cuba can offer the world, like their literacy program, education. I mean, they're so highly educated. So I'm a co-founder, along with Alberto Liscay, a great Cuban artist, of a project called Roots Mambí, a humanitarian aid, cultural exchange program between artists in Los Angeles, California, and Santiago de Cuba. We've gone already for 3 years, and it's a wonderful project. That America does make it very difficult for us to run our project. I tried to do a GoFundMe page, and GoFundMe blocked the page. My brother, through Bank of America, sent me $700 for my plane ticket. They didn't allow to go in because he said, "Bon voyage, Lili, à Cuba." America is making it very difficult for us to run the project. How can you, Cuba, help us to run the project?
How to support what you're doing, we're very limited within the United States. We can support it a lot inside Cuba. It is true that if you make any transaction, not only in the U.S., from anywhere in the world, and you mention Cuba or Cuban, there's a high possibility that it will be frozen. That's the long arm of the U.S. punishing Cuba, not as a bilateral one-directional embargo, but as an extraterritorial blockade that is trying to choke the Cuban economy as well. But within Cuba, we can do a lot, and depending on the type of project, the type of plan, we can many times become very creative in trying to support what you do, or any project that tries to engage with our people, including those of Cuban origin, which is much easier with Cubans or descendants of Cubans anywhere around the world, more difficult in the U.S., where paradoxically is the greatest number of people which are born in Cuba or descendants of Cubans and believe identify themselves as Cubans.
Okay, one more. Yes.
Me? The question I was going to raise is on what is the role in this moment of citizen diplomacy from the U.S.?
And an important point on which I will make some commentary in closing, but I would be remiss, and I have been remiss, in not acknowledging Ambassador Linares Torres, who is with us today. The embargo is a legislative measure by the elected officials of the U.S. Congress, who we, the citizens of the United States, vote to send to the U.S. Congress to represent us both on domestic interests and aspirations, as well as our perspectives about how to engage with people around the world. In our interest as artists and intellectuals, with exchanges with prestigious institutions in Cuba, world-renowned like Casa de las Americas, we are a country that is very ignorant of the rich intellectual and artistic and cultural traditions south of our borders. The Caribbean has produced more Nobel laureates than any place on planet Earth. The Caribbean, I'm not speaking of Latin America now. Cuba exists in the Caribbean, and of course, it is culturally related to Latin America. We have to exercise our right as citizens to go and see for ourselves and to force our policymakers to reflect what our interest is. So for those of us who are activists around Latin America and the Caribbean, we must engage fellow citizens who may not be as current and up to date about the dynamics in Latin America and the Caribbean or between the U.S. and those countries as we are. But I urge you and the C-SPAN audience to go to your policymakers. Demand your right to travel and to see for yourself. Demand your right to establish respectful economic relationships with Cuba. Your right to have exchanges in Cuba. Your right to benefit from the health offerings that Cuba provides for the entire world. During the crisis of COVID, the Cubans, despite the imposition, the constraints on them, produced 5 usable anti-COVID vaccines, used not only in developing countries, but in places like Italy. Mexico reaches out for Cuban doctors. Brazil reaches out for Cuban doctors. Of course, Africa and Asia have benefited. So I want to thank the Deputy Foreign Minister, Carlos Fernández de Cossío, for engaging us today.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
I'm very excited. Yeah, to be there.
C-SPAN, Democracy Unfiltered.